The Ready, Set, Grow podcast is sponsored by Ag Expert, software designed for Canadian agriculture. Visit them today at agexpert.ca.
Welcome to the Ready, Set, Grow podcast, where we like to showcase startup and early stage companies, as well as visit with innovators in the agriculture and food industry. Today, we're here with Dana McCauley and special guest Dana McCauley, Director of New Venture Creation in the Research Innovation Office at the University of Guelph. Dana, thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I've had sort of an interesting career. I've spent my time sort of getting further away from people's mouths. I started out as a chef where I could literally see the people eating the food I created. Then I had a stint in food media, was a cookbook author, and that got some cool attention from the outside world on my work. And I started to develop products and eventually became an executive in several different manufacturing companies where I was in charge of marketing and innovation and developed profitable new products. And from there, I got into the startup world. I took all that experience and I was the founding executive director of Food Starter, which was a incubator and accelerator sponsored by the city of Toronto, where in like 2 years and a bit, I worked with over 140 food companies to help them to get launched and into market. And I left there to join the University of Guelph, where now I use all of those skills to help some of Canada's smartest people take their knowledge and their inventions and turn them into innovations that can have impact on the Canadian economy.
Cool history and background, Dana. So can you tell us a little bit about the projects that you're working on, or maybe some of the different companies that you guys get to work with?
It's really an interesting time for me in my role at the University of Guelph. When I joined in November 2017, we had some really successful spin-out companies like Mirexis and others that would be names that listeners to this podcast might recognize. But we didn't really have a program to help people who wanted to do that to do it more successfully. So my team and I started our first pilot cohort of incubation programming in January 2018. And since then, we now have a really robust pipeline of companies that are either accelerated. In fact, we've already had one exit. One of our companies, We Vitro, was purchased by a competitor, and that founder is moved on to other things. And we have lots of companies that are in what we call pre-acceleration, which is we're grooming them to be ready for things like the RH Accelerator or for venture capital investment. And it's everything from, it's all the full agri-food complement. So we've got a couple of food companies like Neophyto Foods, which is doing really well with a product called NeoKit, which is a plant-based meat type of a concept that you can just make anytime, all the way up to like really high-tech cool stuff like Harvest Genomics, which is a DNA sequencing company that goes right onto farms and right into greenhouses to give people information that they need right now to make decisions about their agricultural businesses. So it's lots of variety, and I learned so much from these amazing innovators.
I'm sure a lot of our listeners aren't familiar with a lot of the things going on at the University of Guelph. Can you just tell us about some of the entrepreneurial programs?
Thanks for asking about that, because it's a really dynamic time. Last year, we were really fortunate to add a new position to the university. So Dr. Felix Arndt has joined us as the chair in entrepreneurship at the Lang School of Business. And we now have a minor in entrepreneurship, and he's working on MBA programs that will focus on entrepreneurship in the food business and many other exciting and new things. We also have a student entrepreneurship center called the Wood Center, where they work on the extracurricular and the curricular side of entrepreneurship. So they're working right with students and going into classrooms and helping people who want to just invent any kind of business. And then my group, we work as a service group to the researchers. So we're all about getting that IP, getting that knowledge that's been developed in the labs into the marketplace. So if the other things are sort of like the general practice, your GP doctor, we're sort of the specialists who are like, okay, how do you take this complex new thing that's potentially disruptive and find the right positioning and make sure there's product market fit. So our ecosystem's matured super fast, and it's a really exciting time at the University of Guelph for entrepreneurship.
Cool. Dana, can you tell us a little bit about, what you see in the ag industry in food, like some of the trends that are coming or any of the insights that you have that you see that are on the horizon?
Yeah, it's a really difficult time for people to sort out the food trends and the drivers behind consumer behavior because we're in such an unusual time, right? So are we going to be sitting around at home watching TikTok and wanting to share with everybody how to fold a tortilla sandwich next year? No, we're hopefully going to be out living our lives and eating tortilla sandwiches with other people. So, optimizing innovation pipelines right now is super important. And I think that the things that innovators in the agri-food vertical should be thinking about are what do consumers care about. So right now I'm seeing lots and lots of interest in immunity. So if you are choosing, if you're a producer and you're choosing between seed A and seed B, if one of them is going to be in higher antioxidant content and you'll be able to position it as being, an immunity boosting ingredient. And likewise, if you're manufacturing something and you think you can have a call out that speaks to immunity, great place to be. Also, a lot of people have been very badly affected economically by this whole year plus that we've had to be out of our normal work environments, particularly gig economy workers and those in the tourism and food service. So longer term, and I think it's like for sure 5 years and probably 10 years, we're going to see a lot more value consumers. So, and they're generally people who are trading down. So they don't feel great about shopping the flyers and going to discount chains. So being able to think about how you can give a premium experience for an excellent price is going to make for a lot of brand loyalty, I think, going forward. And just this, the whole idea of people wanting a lot of information about the food that they're putting into their bodies and about how it was produced. So, kind of expanding clean eating from being just ingredients you can pronounce to being really transparent. So I think if I were running a food manufacturing company right now, I would be putting cameras into my production area so people could see how the food was made. And I'd be sharing a lot of information about the health and safety and sick days and all that kind of stuff that I gave my employees, because I think those are really top of mind. And if I were a producer, or in the supply chain, I would be sharing as much information as possible about how, you do quality assurance and how you make sure that there's no cross contamination and really emphasizing purity, because they say it takes 6 weeks to make a habit. Well, it's 13, 14 months in now. So we are all hyper focused on cleanliness and process and purity. So those are three big buckets. There's obviously going to be lots of other, flavor trends and things like that emerge, but those are some big macro things to focus on.
Well, those are really good, Dana. Do you see anything in the plant space that you're seeing? Like, there's a lot of this plant protein discussion, and so you see different products arising. Do you see that as well?
Absolutely. I firmly believe that the next generation, Gen Z, will be a big driver in the growth of plant-based foods, plant-based clothing, plant-based, everything. And that falls mostly to the young women in that cohort. So the Gen Zs, if you think about, Gen Zs that you might recognize, it's the Greta Thunbergs, the Billie Eilishes, they're very influential, and they're kind of the first generation of fully realized feminists. They own their voice, they own their sexuality, and they're really comfortable being active. And those are going to be the next batch of moms. And guess what? They're going to pass those values down into their family values. And there's going to be a real push for sustainability and ecology in that next, whatever we'll call the group that comes after Gen Z. And that's long term. So I think, over the next century, if we look back, a century ago, it was the end of the Edwardian period. It was a time of luxury and indulgence. And you guys might know that, I started my career writing a cookbook about the Edwardian period, Last Dinner on the Titanic. So I'm always making these comparisons and understanding how much things can change in 100 years. I really think that, I don't think meat will go anywhere, but it might become a little bit more like champagne, or a better bottle of wine, that you have meat and animal products on your table in 2121 as sort of sometimes foods and specialty occasion foods. I think there's a lot of interesting research that corroborates that. My colleague, Dr. Simon Samoji, he's the chair in food business for the Arrell Food Institute. He's doing some research right now that'll hopefully be released later this spring about people's attitudes towards cellular agriculture, which is meat but not meat, where you just take some cells and you grow a protein. So it's an evolving space, and it's probably, we're in a bit of a golden age of food science. It's really exciting to be in this business at this time.
Mm-hmm. You're a woman of leadership, and been in leadership positions, right? And so I'm sure you have lots of tips for the audience in terms of, what kinds of things can you relate to young entrepreneurs or, people that are striving to be in leadership? What are some of your tips that you can give the audience that would help?
Yeah, I think, I'm most proud when people who've been on my teams in the past are really successful, and I think that drives the way I approach leadership. Like, I'm always trying to lift up people, and trying to give them new experiences. And, I'm conscious of the fact that the types of people I want to work with aren't the types of people who are going to be content staying in a job for 20 years. So, just going into a new relationship with an employee or a partner where I know that my job is to help them to do a good job in what they're doing, to get them ready for the next thing. That's worked really, really well for me. And I now collaborate with many people who used to be on my team, and they're now my peers. And that's a really, big part of what I like to do. As far as entrepreneurs go, please don't listen to those people who tell you that you just got to keep grinding it. You got to keep working it. Because guess what? You know what? You're a human being. You're not a machine. You need to have a balanced set of interests to be creative. If you just keep mono focus on one thing all the time, you're not going to be as creative and innovative as if you have varied experiences and varied types of people you speak to, and you widen your reading. So make time to be a person and first, and an entrepreneur second.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any good resources, like books you've seen or books you've read, movies you've seen, or just anything that could be, somebody could look up and help them?
Well, if you're starting a business of any kind, I think, there's lots of great entrepreneurship programs out there, but the best book, if you, are a complete do-it-yourselfer, that I've found is the MIT Disciplined Entrepreneurship. There's a book and a workbook. The book is great. The workbook is invaluable. I'm also a big fan of Simon Sinek's Starts with Why. I think it's a great book, particularly for developing concepts for that Gen Z that I spoke about. In fact, I often joke that if I could eat that book and make it part of me, I would. So I recommend it very, very highly.
Those are definitely good suggestions. In terms of, some of the projects you're working on, I know the Lair is a big project that's
Yes.
coming up. And so can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Thank you so much for asking. Yes, so each year I mentioned to you the types of companies I have coming out of the research enterprise at the University of Guelph. So every year we cull through all the awesome entrepreneurs and we choose 5 who we think have a really important and validated value proposition. And we do this pitch competition. And these aren't companies that are ready for investment. These are companies who have something to tell the world. And we do it because we want to form partnerships. I'm not creating CEOs with my program because they're researchers. We want them to keep inventing things. I'm creating technologies that industry can either invest in and become, co-owners of, or they can license or what have you. So this is the first look at all of these amazing and interesting things that are ready for. It's almost like a debutante's ball, if we could put it into an interesting reference. So this year it's going to be on May 19th. It's online, and if you go to the University of Guelph's webpage and put in Griffin's Lair, and Lair is spelled LAAIR, which is an acronym for Leading to the Accelerated Adoption of Innovative Research, then you'll be able to join us. It's going to be a 45-minute online event on the 19th at 1 p.m.
Great stuff. I've attended the one previous, and it was all virtual because it was during COVID, and just really enjoyed it. Some really good pitches of different companies, new and innovative ideas. And so anything from a producer to industry to an investor, you'll get something from this event for sure. So
thank you. I'm so glad that you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I totally did. And I think, like you mentioned, a lot of those companies have gone on to bigger and better things. So that's really good because they need that help to get known in the industry. And you guys are showcasing it really well. So are there any other projects that you wanted to talk about, Dana, that are happening at the U of G that you wanted to mention, or things that in the food space that you want to share?
Yeah, sure. The one thing that's exciting, I mentioned to you about how there's all this dynamic activity around entrepreneurship at the University of Guelph. So one thing that we've launched as a pilot and is going very soon to be, a more accessible on our website tool is the Guelph Guide to Entrepreneurship. There's resources there from across the ecosystem, that golden horseshoe sort of entrepreneurship ecosystem, that are sort of just like one click away. And you can always get more information about what's happening on campus there. And if anybody has events or tools or workshops that they'd like to share and have on the Guelph Guide to Entrepreneurship, it is a community project. It just happens to be hosted on our webpage.
That's awesome. In the next probably 5 years, there's going to be a lot of changes in the agriculture and food industry. What's probably 1 or 2 things that you're most excited to watch in that time?
Yeah, that's a big question because there's, it just seems like there's change every day. So I feel like by the time it comes out of my mouth, it'll be out of date. But I'm really interested in predictive tools that I'm seeing happen. So for instance, Harvest Genomics, one of our companies that, and actually the company that won the Griffin's Lair pitch last year, they recently did a project with the Ontario greenhouse vegetable growers where they were able to show that they could go into a greenhouse like a week before an outbreak of these pests, these annoying, terrible bugs that can ruin like a $10 million crop of tomatoes, and they could predict that it was happening, and then corrective measures could be taken. And that to me is as somebody who's a gardener and lives in farming country, and where I see some of my neighbors sitting there looking like, oh, when's the soybean going to be at 14% moisture? When can I harvest? And that there's all that waiting. I think that's going to be very empowering for producers to have more predictive tools. And of course, sensors are part of that. And that whole agri-tech, what we'll do with all that data we're capturing. I have a group of colleagues who are working on AgriData Canada, which is is a small project right now, but if it goes well, will be a big project where people can access all kinds of data that's been captured and use it for all kinds of creative purposes. And that's really exciting, because I think stuff we haven't even thought of will come out of that sharing of information, and the different kinds of analysis that big thinkers will do on stuff that we just think of as some numbers.
That's really interesting. Are you working on anything in the robotics and automation space in agriculture?
Yeah, we do have some researchers working on robotics at the university. What we've discovered, and I'm certainly not 100% up to speed, but one of the things we've discovered is that, again, on that analytics side and on that data gathering side, we seem to have a lot more power and value with robots in agriculture than with harvesting and things like that. The dexterity of robots, it's excellent, but it's still not a human hand, to gently like pull an apple or a tomato off a vine. But what they can learn and see and tell you about what's happening seems to be where they're most valuable right now.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Dana. Before we head out, is there anything else you'd want our viewers to know about?
Yeah, not off the top of my head, to be perfectly honest. I feel like I've given you a lot of information. I guess I would just say that if anybody who's listening or watching this is interested in working with the University of Guelph, we are always looking for external partners, and we have a whole team of industry liaison officers who can help external partners to understand how they can work with us to solve their complex scientific problems. So never hesitate to reach out. Yeah, we're here to improve everyone's life, I hope.
How can our listeners connect with you online?
Yeah, I'm really active on Twitter, and that seems to be where a lot of the agri-food folks are. So my handle there is at Dana McCauley, just spelt the way you see it. And on Instagram, I have a handle called at Blue Unicorn Innovation, which is my side hustle, where I do a lot of interaction with food companies because they seem to be more on Instagram. So that if you want to keep up with my insights or have conversations, I'm active on both of those handles pretty much daily.
Perfect. And I just wanted to thank our listeners for tuning into the Ready, Set, Grow podcast. And thank you again, Dana, for joining us to talk about the research and innovation at the University of Guelph.
It was my pleasure. I know I might have sounded a bit gushy, but the fact is it's just really a cool place to be right now. And there's so much good news to share.